The last time that the Detroit Lions and the Carolina Panthers squared off in the later weeks of 2022, the Panthers' offense put up quite a show. But in this upcoming matchup that the Lions and Panthers have, it could very well be the exact opposite for the Panthers' offense. We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy.
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
Who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
Led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM, Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and we are diving in right now. And as always, I just want to say welcome back to all those that are coming back to the show. And if you're brand new to the show, I'm so very glad to see that you're here. So thankful that you decided to give my show a view. And as always, for both viewing audiences members, I want to say thank you all for your view. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for your subscription if I've earned it. And with that, I again just want to say God bless. And let's get into today's content. So, here's the thing, folks. When we're talking about this matchup that's coming up between the Panthers and the Lions, as I did in yesterday's episode where I kind of talked about the generalization of the Panthers' defense and the Lions' offense, now I'm going to talk about the opposite. I'm going to talk about the generalization of the Panthers' offense and the Lions' defense. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently here. Rather than talking about the Lions' defense in relation to the Panthers' offense, like the Lions is going to be the primary, motivation of the whole show, I'm going to actually start with the Panthers' offense here, and there's a decent reason as to why I'm doing it. And here's the reason. When you take a look at what the Lions are doing on defense right now, it's not very hard to see that the Lions' defense is producing very, very well. And I have said this before in the last couple of episodes that I've done over the last couple of weeks. The point of the matter is that even though I have problems still with Aaron Glenn, and a lot of people are still giving me a little bit of guff about it, that's totally fine. The point of the matter is that the Lions' defense is producing extremely well right now. And it's not very hard to see it, especially when you watch the last two games, when you take a look at the statistical output, when you take a look at statistical rankings. It's very plainly obvious to see how well the Lions are doing on defense. So I was like, okay here. I don't really have to do a too hard of a job at this point to try and explain how well the Lions are doing on defense. But here's the one thing I have had to do in the past. I've had to at least show how the Lions are doing on defense versus whatever offense we're about to square up against. And I figured, okay, let's kind of reverse the effect here and talk about how the Panthers' offense, is coming into a situation where, for all intents and purposes, I think that this might just be a bloodbath because, I'm sorry, I'm taking a look at what this Panthers offense has to offer, and there ain't nothing about it that I'm really particularly scared about. And I know that might sound a little bit cocky, especially for very early into this video, but once I start showing you what I mean, you guys are going to get a much better sense of why I'm saying what I'm saying. So without further ado, let's talk about today's content. So, Carolina Panthers. We know right now that they're in essence a rebuilding team. They just hired themselves a brand new head coach. They just drafted themselves a brand new quarterback. This is a rebuilding team, without a doubt. But here's the thing about rebuilding teams. Sometimes rebuilding teams take a little bit of time to figure themselves out, especially when we're talking about brand new quarterbacks. Well, this is definitely the case when we're talking about the Carolina Panthers. And this is where I'm going to start today's episode. It's going to be with Bryce Young. And I'm just going to say this right now. I remember back when we were in the draft process for this year's draft, there were some people that said that Bryce Young was going to be whatever, like the next big-time quarterback, blah, 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 because of all he'd done at Alabama. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't hold a whole lot of stock in Alabama quarterbacks because realistically, Alabama quarterbacks don't have a very good track record in the NFL of being good successes once they leave college. They're a little bit better than Ohio State quarterbacks are, but not much better. Well, here's the thing with Bryce Young. One of the biggest knocks I have against Bryce Young is virtually his size and also his height. He's just not very big in terms of his weight, and he's not very big in terms of his height. Well, when you take a look at the Carolina Panthers offense, that is already starting to show some problems in terms of what the Panthers offense can do and can clearly not do. What I'm saying here is this. Bryce Young is clearly a weakness for the Panthers offense right now, and I'm saying that in the highest sense I can right now. I can't look into the future and say whether or not this kid's going to figure it out or not, but right now he's not figuring it out, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what I mean right here. If you go to Next Gen Stats by the NFL, you're going to see two stats that are really going to show a very, how do I put this? Like, this is very telling. There are two stats out there that's called completed air yards and intended air yards. What does that mean? Well, basically what it means is how far a quarterback is intending to throw the ball down the field and how far the ball is actually traveling down the field when it's actually being completed in terms of air yardage. Well, here's what I got to say. If you take a look at Next Gen Stats, Bryce Young is dead last out of all quarterbacks that are being recorded right now in both of those categories. His completed air yardage, 2.7 yards, 2.7 air yards completed when he actually gets the ball completed to said wide receivers. When you take a look at intended air yardage, again, dead last again. It's only 5.2 air yards. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that Bryce Young isn't even attempting really to throw the ball down the field, and when he does actually complete passes, it's virtually almost for nothing. Now, I'm not saying that Bryce Young never completes a pass past 5 yards. That would be just foolish. I'm talking about averages here. But when you take a look at that, 2.7 yards on average for completed air yardage and 5.2 yards in terms of average for intended air yardage, that means that the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, Bryce Young is not even trying to throw the ball down the field. Because if he was, the intended air yardage would be much higher and maybe the completed air yardage would simply not be. But the point of the matter is, he's not even trying to throw the ball down the field. Now, why is this important? Well, as I said in a previous episode, I watched the Panthers versus Vikings game last Sunday, and let me tell you something. That was a very hard game to watch because it wasn't particularly entertaining, but it was very, very informative as far as what the Panthers do on offense, because I'm going to tell you this right now. That offense that the Panthers put out on the field was not good at all. And I'm going to show you here very quickly what I mean in terms of Bryce Young's production from that game. Take a look at this passing chart. Again, this also comes from Next Gen Stats. This is ridiculous. Take a look at this. You are going to see on this chart right now that there are 13 green dots that are at or behind the line of scrimmage for this chart. When you take a look at this, what that means is it backs up what Next Gen Stats is talking about, the completed air yardage and the intended air yardage. These balls that freaking Bryce Young is throwing, they're not really even getting past the line of scrimmage in most of the time. Because here's what I can tell you. Bryce Young had 25 completions in that game against the Vikings. 13 of those completions were at or behind the line of scrimmage, meaning over 50% of his passes didn't even get past the line of scrimmage. And you're going to see, or should have seen, on that chart that I just shown you, there is like a good cluster of 8 or 9 of them that is literally right behind the line of scrimmage to the right. Meaning that all the Panthers are really doing on their offense most times is trying to set up screen passes. Now, what does that mean? One, it means something to this effect, and I heard this during the actual broadcast. The Panthers are running an extremely conservative play calling set right now. Now, what does that mean? It means one of two things. Either your offense as a whole is not that good, which, let's be fair here, the Panthers offense as a whole isn't that good, but also it means this. They're trying to dumb down the play calling because their quarterback is not nearly as confident to try and take those shots down the field. Because when you call a whole lot of screen passes, there's virtually no work you have to do as a quarterback. You snap the ball, you drop back, you let the defenders suck themselves in a little bit, come after you, and then you just drop it off to whoever's the screen man, whether it's a wide receiver, a tight end, running back. It's not that hard to do. Virtually any quarterback knows how to throw a screen pass. And here's why this is very, very interesting to me. Why in the thunder would the Panthers run screen passes all day long when the Vikings pass defense, and I looked this up in Pro Football Reference, You take a look at the Vikings pass rank, it's ranked 21st. So they are a below average pass defense. So why would you run a whole bunch of screens against a below average pass defense? That to me just doesn't make any sense, because one of the two things doesn't add up here. Like I said, either your offense as a whole isn't very good, or you don't believe your quarterback can take advantage of that weakened pass defense. Well, in my opinion, it's more likely that the Panthers just don't think that Bryce Young's ready to do it because he's got something going on. That's the only reason that you call that many screen passes in a game, because it's like, you had Adam Thielen in that game, you had Terrence Marshall, you had DJ Chark. So in essence, you had all of your top receivers. Why would you still keep throwing screen passes? That to me just makes no sense. Now, that's the first thing about Bryce Young. Here's the second thing about Bryce Young. We also need to consider this. Through the first 3 games that Bryce Young has played, because he did miss 1 game due to injury, Young has also been sacked 11 times, which is tied for 8th most out of all individual quarterbacks. But the Panthers as a team are also the 8th most sacked team in the NFL with 14 sacks. Now, I don't need to tell you all this, but the Lions are currently one of the most producing teams in terms of sacks right now. I think they're in the top 10. Well, let's just understand something here. If Bryce Young has been sacked 11 times in 3 games, and the Panthers as a whole have been sacked 14 times in the last 4 games, that right there already tells me something. The Panthers quarterbacks are vulnerable to getting sacked because their offensive line is not that good. And with the freaking Lions defense figuring out how to get after the quarterback right now over the last 2 weeks, I expect the Lions are going to have a field day, a feast day, if you will, against Bryce Young. Because again, when you have a young rookie quarterback like Bryce Young, they're not yet figuring out the freaking safety valves. They're not figuring out the hot reads, the checkdowns. They're still trying to figure all that out, which means they're going to hold on the ball a lot longer, which means more sack production from your defensive linemen and your defensive edge rushers. So again, that's all from Bryce Young, and we're 11 minutes into this. So that right there tells me that Bryce Young is a huge vulnerability for this Panthers offense. Now, let's kind of also take a look at this in another way here. Not only is Bryce Young a weakness for the Panthers offense due to his various limitations right now, with his inexperience, his height, his inability or his timidness, if you will, for not wanting to throw the ball down the field, but also take a look at the Panthers offense, passing offense, in another way. It's extremely one-dimensional. Because, one, not only, as I said, are they trying to do a whole lot of screen passes, but at the same time, they're not taking any deep shots down the field. There's only one guy, really, that the Panthers are really using in terms of their passing offense to really get it going, and that's Adam Thielen. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Us Lions fans, we have a ton of experience about playing against Adam Thielen because he played for the Vikings for a long time. We know what kind of player Adam Thielen is. Adam Thielen is still a really good wide receiver. But at the same time, he's an old wide receiver. I think he's, 34, 35 years old? He's not the same guy he was 4 or 5 years ago. But here's what I can tell you right now. If you take a look at what the Panthers quarterbacks, primarily Bryce Young, but also, again, there was 1 game with Andy Dalton as a starter. If you take a look at the 4 games that the Panthers quarterbacks have had, they've completed 101 passes to various wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. You get my drift here. I want you guys to take a look at this. Of those 101 completed passes, Adam Thielen accounts for 26.7% of the receptions of the total team thus far. He accounts for 33.2% of the total receiving yards thus far. And he accounts for 50% of the receiving touchdowns thus far. Pretty much what I'm trying to get here is this. If you take out Adam Thielen, you pretty much take out the Panthers' offensive passing attack, because Adam Thielen is what makes the offense work. Now, granted, they do have Terrence Marshall. Granted, they do have DJ Chark. But neither Dalton nor freaking Young have utilized those guys nearly as much as what they've done with Adam Thielen. And I'm telling you this right now. I watched, like I said, that game against the Vikings and the Panthers. During that game, Adam Thielen got hurt with an injury. And when Adam Thielen left the game, the Panthers offense went even to a more conservative offense because it was not able to get anything going. There was like a good two-quarter period where the Panthers offense virtually just disappeared altogether. There was like almost no production at all because once Adam Thielen even came back, they still couldn't get him going because, again, it wasn't the same type of offense, even with an injured Adam Thielen out there. That's my whole point here. With Adam Thielen, that is your only liable offense. That's your only viable weapon that the Panthers are using right now, and they really haven't used the other two guys all that much. That's a problem, because if you have that much dependability on one individual, if that person gets taken away either by good defensive game planning, good defensive coverage, whatever you want to call it, it's really going to make things difficult for that Panthers offense when they're already having so many difficulties to begin with. Okay, now let's get into this. Let's get into this second part here. Now let's take a look at the running game of the Panthers. Now, the running game of the Panthers is much like almost any other offense in the NFL right now. It's a dual running back committee approach. However, when you take a look at the Panthers running back committee approach, it's failing to produce much of anything in terms of that committee. If you take a look at it, the two running backs that the Panthers have that they use the most is Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders. When you take a look at those two guys, Chuba Hubbard right now, in terms of overall production over the games, is the more productive back. But it's not by much of leaps and bounds anyway. Because take a look at this. Miles Sanders, through the first 4 games of the Panthers season, has 54 rush attempts, 158 yards, 1 touchdown for 2.9 yards an average a rush. That's horrible. When you take a look at Chuba Hubbard, he's got 26 rushing attempts for 119 yards, no rushing touchdowns, but that rushing average is substantially better at 4.6. Now, what does that mean here to me? Well, here's what I know for a fact. When you take a look at the running game and it's doing that very little, it means, one, that the rushing attack of the Panthers offense is extremely underperforming. But also, number 2, it means if Hubbard is doing that much better in comparison to Miles Sanders, at least in terms of rushing average a pop, and he's like literally a whole 50% less in terms of rushing production, in terms of attempts, they're also underutilizing Hubbard quite substantially. Which, when you underutilize your best weapons on your offense, that then means this: you're putting more pressure on the passing game to pick up the slack, which ultimately means you're putting more pressure on Young. Young doesn't have the experience to handle that pressure. Young is being timid right now because there's a very conservative offense approach being put out on the field. This is all just spiraling. It's a snowball effect. It's just a domino effect. It's just, okay, if you try to do one thing and you're not able to do it, it just starts leading into other problems and it just exacerbates it. So when you think about it, that right there is yet another problem that this Panthers offense has when you're talking about the Lions defense. And also think about this. I took a look at the last 4 games. The Panthers offense has not really had a chance where they've led in most games. Which means another thing is also very likely. If you don't have the ability to lead in games, and that means that you have the opposing offense that keeps racking up points, it means you have to further abandon the run game to try and get the passing game to get back into a game, which again leads to the problems that I've already stated with Bryce Young and the Panthers passing attack. But again, take a look at that Vikings game. That game, the Vikings throughout the majority of the game had the lead up until the last moment. But even still, they couldn't win the game. These are all facts that I'm trying to point together here as to why I think the Lions defense is about to have themselves a field day. Now, here's why I'm going to say this. If you take a look at the Lions defense here, I know some people are not going to like the fact that it took me this long to talk about the Lions, but when you think about how bad the Panthers offense is, the Lions defense should have themselves an absolute just field day. They should just feast here. Because think about it. This Lions defense is going to be getting after a quarterback that is just not very good right now. And the Lions defense has been getting after the quarterback rather regularly and effectively over the last 2 weeks. Again, when you produce 12 sacks in 2 games, you're doing something right. And like I said, with this rookie quarterback of Bryce Young being very timid, he's being very inexperienced, he's not really trying to push the ball down the field or thread the needle a whole lot, it means that the Lions are going to get a lot of sacks and they're going to get a lot of pressures. Think about this, folks. The Vikings, in their game against the Panthers last week, produced 5 sacks and had a 40% pressure rate. If you take a look at what the Lions did against the freaking Packers, it was virtually the exact same thing. But the difference is that the Vikings are one of the most heaviest blitzing teams in the NFL. The Lions are not. So if the Lions are not having to blitz all that much, but they're still getting the pressure, that means that those guys up front are doing a very good job in their one-on-ones to effectively get said pressure, which means you can start dropping more guys in coverage. If you only need to use 4 guys to get a 40% pressure rate and all those sacks, and now you're forcing a quarterback to throw it into more coverage, chances are you're most likely going to get more turnovers. And here's what I mean by this. I'm going to put these stats back up on the screen, or actually I'm going to put these stats up on the screen here to show you just how effective the Lions offense is doing right now. If you take a look at the Lions defense over the last 4 weeks, particularly, you're going to see this Lions defense has made a humongous jump in comparison to where it was last year at this time. Take a look at these numbers. The Lions are ranked 13th in points given up. They're ranked 4th in total yards. They're tied 3rd in yards per play. They're tied 14th in total first downs, 18th in passing yards, 6th in passing average. They have the number 1 rushing defense, which a lot of Lions fans have already pointed out there, but I want to make sure I give it its credence. Then they also have the 2nd best rushing average in terms of the rushing defense. They're tied 5th in penalties, they're tied 10th in scoring drive percentage, and they're ranked 22nd in turnover percentage. Summation, the Lions defense has been playing very well to be a fringe top 10 defense, which is something I didn't think we were going to be talking about this early in the season. But the Lions are doing very well on defense. But here's why I'm saying this now. I wanted to give you guys the evidence of how bad the Panthers offense was before I started talking about how good the Lions defense is. And when you take a look at how good the Lions defense is versus all of these problems I just pointed out with the Panthers offense, the Lions defense should be able to dominate against this Panthers offense, very weak offense in my opinion, very easily. Because again, let's consider the facts for what we already know them to be. The Lions are going to be at home. The Lions always do better at home. The Lions are also going to be at home, which means there's going to be a loud, just ridiculously crazy Lions crowd that is going to make it very loud, very difficult for that Panthers offense to work in that hostile environment. And then on top of that, the Lions offense is also going to play defense for the Lions defense, because here's the thing, the more points that the Lions offense puts up, it's going to put more pressure on the Panthers offense to try and respond, which means they're going to go to the air more. The Panthers offense is not very good trying to throw the ball right now, which means there's more opportunities for sacks, which means there's more opportunities for turnovers, particularly interceptions. But also we've also seen that Bryce Young has a problem holding on to the ball. But here's my whole point here. When you think about this, the Panthers offense versus the Lions defense. The Lions defense has got a very, very effective front four in terms of whoever they've got rushing the quarterback. You've got Romeo Carr, you've got freaking John Kaminsky, you've got Aleem McNeil. You're also getting production from your interior pass rush guys, such as, freaking Isaiah Buggs, Benita Jones. You also are getting a lot of production from Aiden Hutchinson. You're also getting production from your outside linebackers, such as Jack Campbell, whoever else. The Lions are able to bring pressure and sack production from multiple areas, which then means, as I said, you're going to allow those defensive backs to start dropping further into coverage, which means that guys like Brian Branch, if he plays, Kirby Joseph, if he plays, Emmanuel Mosley, who should play, and then you've also got freaking Cameron Sutton and Jerry Jacobs, Tracy Walker. They're all going to have a lot more, they're going to have not only a lot more opportunities to get turnovers, they're going to have a much easier time of it, because when quarterbacks are pressured and they're under duress, it means that they make rush decisions, which means there's more likelihood of getting said turnovers. So when you take a look at what the Lions defense has so far, and you take a look at what the Panthers offense is bringing to work, it's an offense that really only has one real playmaker. It has virtually no running game and a quarterback that won't push the ball down the field, and at the same time is very timid because he's throwing almost nothing past the line of scrimmage to begin with, but really won't do anything that's very far down the field. What that tells me, it is a recipe for disaster, because what the Panthers offense is going to do is it's going to fall behind. The Lions offense is going to keep scoring more points, and then it means that the Panthers offense is going to then be resulting in the fact that it has to start throwing the ball, forcing more opportunities for sacks and more opportunities for turnovers. So, as I said in my title image, I think the Panthers are about to get annihilated at Ford Field. We'll see what happens. But again, the Lions defense right now, it's surging. It's absolutely playing at a very, very high level. And the Panthers offense is not. And again, I'm not trying to sound like a homer. I'm not trying to sound like that the Panthers don't have a shot. But it's like, listen, I would be shocked if the Panthers offense just all of a sudden came into Ford Field and just absolutely found a way to just click it right on. I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll see what happens. Based upon the evidence, based upon the statistical output that I'm seeing, I just don't see it. But with that having been said, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of Motor City Mania, MCM. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you liked what you saw, but you just forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, I highly encourage y'all, please make sure you turn on that bell notification icon at the bottom of the page, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, the number for subscriptions is continually going up. Let's make sure we turn that bell notification on at the same time, so that way you never miss any more of my content, so that way you're always up to date with the latest content that I have. I also encourage y'all, please, to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it everywhere and anywhere that you can with everybody and anybody that you can. Let's keep getting the word out, folks. And with that being said, this is Motor City Mania signing off for now, and I just want to say to everybody that tuned in for the show, again, thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the very next episode.